Okay, so for the transmission there are three type of bolts. The big aluminum bolts like that, they are used on the driver's side. They held the bracket in place that is going with electrical wire. So these one, I would suggest you just tie them by hand for now. You gotta make sure that you put the brackets behind them prior to torque them. Okay, this one here is a special bracket that goes for the pre-catalyst. The pre-catalyst are the parts like a small kind of elbow kind of thing coming from the turbos going down to the main exhaust that is going two pipes merging into one toward the rear. So this one here gonna be the aluminum bolt also. That one is really something you need to put really at the end of this thing. So this is what it is for that. And this bolt here, these both here are there's two like that. They're going on top of the engine. Don't forget that the engine is like tilted an angle when it's in the car. When you look from the rear toward the front, and the bolts are like on top here and here. I'm gonna show later on. This bolt here, there's three of them, and they're working with that bracket here to hold this bracket in place. There's two bolts in fact that hold the bracket. The third one doesn't hold this thing. This is a bracket that here you clip the oxygen sensor connectors at the bottom of the transmission. Okay, so the two big bolts that I was showing earlier. Oops, sorry that it's shaking a bit. This is not a easy place to be. This big bolt here, there's two of them. They go right here on this hole right there. So they go right here. One is going there, and if you follow that line, the other one is like about here. Okay, and then if you look on the passenger side, these holes here. Okay, so the aluminum bolt, they go in holes like that. There's three of them. There's one here. Let me see. Yeah, the first one is here. So first one is right here, second one, and the third one is right here. So there's three of them on the passenger side on the transmission, but this is to fix the transmission on the engine. This is now the engine we're looking at. Okay, and at the bottom you see this little so the aluminum bolts are going here, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, this one's got a guide bushing, and the small ones, they go here. There's one here, two here, and there's a third one slightly up on the side. And higher than this third one, you got two big aluminum bolts on the driver's side. The other side that I cannot show right now, that are like that. So you got two aluminum bolts going above the third one here, and above that the only thing you have is the starter. There's two bolts for the starter. So right now we're gonna put the transmission on, and once the transmission is on, we're looking to install this this bolt here at first, and there's another one that is, if you follow, I don't know if I can show it. Let me try to show you. Right here. So this one here and this one here are the two big steel bolts that's gonna help to hold this thing in place. Then starter is gonna be the last thing to install. The jack was set a bit too much on the front. Jack has to move slightly on the back, so it's going to be at the center of gravity. So we lower the transmission on the wood blocks and just move the jack slightly on the back. When you jack the transmission, you gotta make sure on the upside of it that everything clears. We are two working on it, one holding the balance and the other one is moving the jack forward, backward, and jacking it and helping for the balance of the transmission.
Ooh. Okay. Okay.
From this point on, the transmission's got to roll a bit in order to line up the bolt patterns so that we can put it on the locating pins. Be careful not to drop it off the jack though. The gap between the transmission and the engine is greater on the top of the transmission, so we have to jack the front of the engine a bit in order to have a parallel gap along the transmission flange. Jack. So then once again we have to roll the transmission in order to line up the hole with the locating pin. Now one of us is holding the transmission firmly in place, make sure it's not gonna reopen the gap, and then I'm trying to go put some bolt on top of it, the steel bolts. I'd rather the steel bolts than the aluminum bolt to hold it in place. On the driver's side there is a little gap, so trying to go with the bolt slowly. Gotta make sure that the pin is in the hole though. Don't want to pinch it with by torquing with a bolt. It's just a matter of closing the gap that tends to open, but it is on the pin, so it's a safe thing to do so. Just make sure not to use tool, just by hand should be plenty enough. Inserting an aluminum bolt on that hole because this is where the locating pin is, so just to pinch the transmission, no, not really torquing it, just picking up the loose. Okay, so now we're gonna torque the lower bolts with the bracket that holds the oxygen sensors, the connectors. So these small bolts torque I found is 168 pound-inch. So there's 3 of them. We have to put this bolt on. This is an old bolt. It's right there. Meanwhile, because there's a guide bushing here, like a locating pin. And there's another one on the driver's side, high above. So you gotta make sure that the transmission is clamped over these locating pins when you clamp it. So for now we're gonna torque the 3 lower steel bolts, the small ones, and the 2 big ones above. Now I'm just behind the transmission, looking forward at the car. So it's like looking from the rear to the front. So anyway, this is the idea. So torquing these 2 bolts. And now we're just picking up the loose. torque. It's not a big torque for the lower bolts. And now the third one. That's it. Okay, so you can see that bolt. Hold on. That bolt right there. This is the boat that is high above the big boats that are. Let me try to put this thing in another type of light to point at you. So this boat down there, right? This boat is right there. This one here. That's the boat that is the big one on top, and this one is 49 pound-foot. That's what I found for this one. You gotta kind of try to dig out according to your transmission code. Some transmission, I think they have just steel bolts from a certain date, but the one I have, we have 2 steel bolts on top, 3 at the bottom, and then the remaining is going to be aluminum. So you can see there's, you can see this one here and this one and this one, they're going to be aluminum. For now, this one we put the an aluminum old bolt, but it's not torque, it's just to pick up the loose, because there's a guide locating pin there. So I'm gonna finish these 3 aluminum bolts and the 2 on the other side once I'm installing the final stuff around them. In order to torque the upper bolt there, that's one of the upper transmission to the engine bolt. This one we had to use a ratchet like that, because you can like swivel a bit inside because of this place here. So unless you have a short torque wrench, this worked better. So it's about 1 foot, so you gauge about 50 pounds of force on that leverage. So that's what it is. So that bolt is torque as well. In order to get access to that bolt that was there, this bolt there that we just showed, yeah, this bolt there. In order to get access to it, what we did is we removed the jack that was supporting the engine, because now the transmission is stuck to the engine, and there's still the jack underneath that's holding it. So we jack as much as we can the transmission so that the engine tilted like that, so we have more access to that bolt there. Okay, so I bolted the starter in place. This lower bolt here is bolted that way. The other bolt is bolted from the back. The one there is a very long bolt. It's about that long. I would say about 3 inch. This one is a shorter one. It's about maybe 1.5 inches. I just torqued them by the feeling. These are steel bolts. There should be a similar torque to the one on the bottom. Maybe slightly bigger. I think the bolts are slightly bigger. Yeah, they're a bit bigger. So maybe around 20 foot-pounds, something like that. But this is just a guess. So, but you can go by the feeling. These are steel bolts. You should not over torque. You can have a good feeling of those. So at this point, the idea is to just try to clear a bit the mess of all the wiring. So this track here is easy, goes on the this track here is an easy one. That one goes here on top. So all that's related to that, we can pull it away, and then you'll be able to see something better. So now this, if you start from your computer, I think they call this the DME. They used to call this ECM. In a way, the computer that managed the fuel injection. So this whole thing. So this whole thing goes around here. That already starts to make more sense. At this time, now I thought it would take more time to split it apart. So at this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back there and set the duct, the rear turbo duct, which look somewhat like this. Okay, now it's all plugged. So I'm gonna set that thing on the back. There's also a bracket that holds it in place. So that's what I'm looking for now. Okay, so I have to install the rear turbo duct behind, but it's not really going through. The round part that fits in the turbo right there, in between my two fingers, this round thing there. So what I'm doing is I'm removing the engine support that was on that side. So first off, you loosen up the nut, then you hook up the crane, right? So once you got this up, you pick up a bit of the load. You got to be careful because the transmission is on and it's sitting on the jack rear there, so you kind of want to make sure there's still a bit of room in all of this. So sometimes you need to loosen up the jack slowly. So once you have the load on the crane, you can remove the engine support. There's 4 bolts to be removed. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to lower the engine on that side, so the engine should flip like that a bit, and that should give me enough room to pass this this round piece that connects to the turbo. Got to be careful, keep looking at if the jack still holds good on the transmission, because right now the engine is located in the car with just one engine support, which is on the exhaust side. Okay, now as you can see, we're able to pass this thing right here. It was hardly passing. I'm gonna try to show you. Grab a screwdriver. Here you got this kind of bump in the frame, and the space between this thing here and this hose and this part of the engine. There's a metal clip that goes here. It just fell off. I'm gonna have to just put it back at some time. So anyways, the space was not big enough. Now that the engine is tilted, I can pass this thing below that level, but it's getting tight in space here on the back with the firewall. So now I'm gonna gently raise the engine once again with the engine crane, and as it goes slowly, making sure my jack on the transmission is still fine, and then passing this thing, the turbo air duct, in between the engine and the firewall. So you might wonder why instead I should have maybe just put the duct prior to inserting the turbo. It's because I wanted to make sure that I'm gonna have enough room to have a good torque on my boats on the transmission, so that gives me more room, and it's not so much of a headache to do what I just did. It would have been better if I don't have to do anything, but I'd rather have that than to have a struggle to bolt the transmission on the engine and then also the starter. So now these two things are done high above. All that's remaining is the big aluminum bolts. So I'm good with this little extra step, but you got to be careful, aware of because the engine is still heavy, you know. And here at the bottom you have this let me try to show you. You got it here, you have this hydraulic hose that is for the power steering, the one that makes like a U kind of thing. So make sure that it's not sitting on the sway bar. So I put the hose that passes here. This is annoying. The hose that passes here. I made it so it's in between the aluminum frame there and the sway bar, so the engine's not gonna pinch that hose if it's going too low. Okay, so now kind of squeezes here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna raise the transmission. That should make some space in between these two things. That's almost good. Still some. So it's a bit of a headache, I gotta say, because the round piece that needs to connect to the turbo cannot pass that hose. So the best way I found was to put the duct straight up, as you can see. So I got it straight up like that, and I slide it under the hose, under the wire, electrical wiring. Seems like I'm gonna be able to do so. It's a bit of a headache. Maybe some of you would rather have a bit of a struggle with the transmission bolts, but it's doable that way. Just want to say, it's just that it's a bit of a challenge. So you see now it's straight up like that. So now it's a matter of turning on the back of the engine. So the way it goes, it's I slide it. Let's say my thumb is the round piece that needs to connect to the turbo, so I got it there. Slide the whole thing like that. Now I'm trying to turn, and then I'm gonna be able to slide it like that. There's another way around that seemed maybe that could have worked. It's from underneath, but I got the red jack there holding the transmission. But if you would take that part and try to slide it above, maybe it's gonna work. But that seems to work. So the setup is, the engine is I would say as low as I can with the crane, and I jacked the transmission as high as I can. So it's a tight fit, but I think it's gonna work in the end. Okay, so that part here, as you can see, is almost in. So in order to be able to fit this thing in place, I had to lift up that part here, lift it up a bit, the round part that connects, try to lift it up. And then up here, I have to try to fit it in place, which is a bit difficult. And at a certain point, I had to use a bit of force, not too much, but just to. This is this plastic here. This piece here has been bended a bit, and this one as well, and it's able to go through. So it's almost in place, but yeah, the main idea is at some point you have to lift up the lower part. That helped to free it. Kind of, you want to put it close to its own place where it's gonna be installed. So then you need to slide this thing inside the turbo air duct. So this is going inside the plastic part that way. So you got the plastic duct on that side, and you got the aluminum kind of a spiral on that side. So that flange sits on the aluminum spiral kind of thing of the turbo on the rear. So I think it's going to be easier to slide this thing on the plastic first and just sit it on the aluminum right after that. So there has been a bit of a change of plan. It's easier to go from underneath the car to connect this thing. So I set the rubber on the turbo aluminum part, and now I'm gonna just connect the duct on it. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, you can see the duct right there. So once it's on, then it's gonna rotate around it, and it's just a matter of screwing this thing in place. Okay, so this thing needs to be bolted right here on the back, and there's a second bolt that is, let me try to show you. I don't know if you can see it. It's right here. Where's the light? So let me show you with my fingers. So first bolt I showed, this is the firewall. I'm in the, this is the valve cover. This is a stud for the intake. So this is one of the bolt that is there. So first one is right here. Second one is it's the lightning that is a headache to try to show you guys. Okay, so first bolt right here. Second bolt is right there. Yeah, it's a bit hard to see, but this is where it is. Okay, so these bolts are you can it's a Torx. I think it's Torx 30. You need one of these tools to work on such a kind of car because of it's a tight space mechanic. This is like a wrench that is ratchet on this close hand. Then you can put bits in there. That's what you need. So what I did is I pick up the loose and leave a bit of it, and then you set up the round piece over the turbo. Once it's done, you tighten this thing up properly, and you revisit down there to try to improve the fit of the rubber over the turbo, the rubber gasket kind of thing. Yeah, it's a bit hard to see, but I think you got the idea in a way. This is exactly where it is. So once this is done, the only thing remains is to install that bracket here. This is a bracket that goes somewhat like this on the side of the like this on the side of the engine. So the space is to go behind the duct to hold it in place. So you're gonna need like a mirror to set that thing in place. If you want to have a very good view of it, there is a video I did when I took out the engine, because when I took out the engine I took it out with this duct in place, and once you see the engine beside, you can really see it easily. You can always also use a mirror with a flashlight to help you out to try to see where the hole is and everything. So basically that's what it is. So that's what I'm up to now. And the bolt to that thing is this little bolt here. So this little bolt, it's a 10mm. Use that hole to hold this thing in place. Okay, now once you're done, you have to keep an eye. You gotta keep an eye on stuff. Maybe you have to lower your transmission a bit. So maybe once you're done, maybe you have to lower your transmission a bit. Then what you do is you line up the engine support in that lower stud there. Where's the light? Okay, once this is in there, you just let it sit on the flange on the side of the engine block, and you're gonna see if you can. You probably have to raise the engine again. So you raise it a bit until you can put the bolts by hand. Keep an eye on the transmission. You jack very slowly. If you need, you lower it again or jack it according to how you're gonna see how it goes. And then once this is set, when you want to set your boat, you might have to push a bit on the engine, push a bit like that or push a bit like that, just a little, in order to get some play between the boat and the hull. So once this is done, I'm gonna torque these both there, the 4 bolts, just by hand, just with a wrench, with common sense. And then I'm gonna set this nut that goes on the stud on the lower